We're in the middle of winter, right? Especially in Buffalo. It's snowing. We're supposed to be getting a lot of snow today. Um, Tim Swenson, who lives nowhere near snow, never experiences this. Um, but I can hear my neighbors' snowblowers going at this moment.
We got 2 inches.
Oh, in Ohio, in
Yeah, in
Columbus.
Columbus.
Yeah, yeah, we're supposed to get a bit more than that. This is on top of it rained and now it's frozen, and so it's a real special kind of mess. Anyway, it's the perfect day to stay indoors and play with your Timex computer if you are so inclined. I know I said in the email that there were things that we could talk about. One of which was doing some planning for the VCF Midwest meeting attendance, rather. Um, but I actually want to jump to Carl. Carl,
Yep, I'm here.
you're there. So, Carl, you sent a very tantalizing email to the groups.io list about a thing that you have you started working on it, or are you going to work on it? This was like this massive expansion for the
Oh yeah, so I guess I'm kind of coining it the 1560 uh in relation to the 2060 that never happened. But hopefully this happens. Um but yeah, it's more a uh conglomeration, I guess, or of a lot of different mods for the
yeah.
1000 that I think a lot of people would appreciate having, especially those that don't want to open their machine up or do an internal composite mod. I mean, that would be my first choice, but a lot of people don't want to or don't have the capability to do that, right? So this doesn't help on the video side, but it certainly helps with the RAM expansion, so you don't have to worry about a RAM pack anymore. Plus, it's 64K. That's the intention, anyways, to have full 64K
Yeah.
RAM capability, so that way you could actually put in, on the lower 8K, you could put in another ROM image, right, and switch that in
Yeah.
if you wanted to. Then from 2000 to 4000, a lot of different high res graphics use that area for RAM, so
Yeah.
they can store their UDGs, right, and there's also other mods that use that area for one thing or another. So, I want to make that kind of switchable. So I think I'm going to go down to 2K chunks on that. So there'll be four switches to select which chunk that you want down there
Hmm.
as RAM or not. And then of course from 4000 to 8000 is our wonderful 16K expansion area system RAM.
Yeah.
And then 8K to BFFF is the next 16K chunk, right? Where you can actually run machine code. And I guess the basic programs can actually spill over. There's a few basic programs, I guess, that go over 16K. I think there's Super Star Trek, or there's a couple of them out there. You can find them, but they actually need 32K of RAM for these basic programs to work,
Yeah.
which is kind of
Yeah.
crazy to me.
Well, how does
But
that work? Do they have machine language portions? Because
Well,
basic is,
so as Carl brings this up, and your question is perfectly apt. I remember archiving a program. I feel like an accounting program or something. Actually, Joe did the archiving of it, and it it required either 32K or like a full 64K, and you had to do a couple pokes before you even loaded the program. I mean, you could load the program and it would sort of immediately crash, but if you did the the poke to set RAM top
Mhm.
and then load it, it would work out just fine.
Right, you're right. That was for to allow BASIC to store variable data
Yeah,
up in that area, not machine code though.
right, right.
So yeah, the actual program or the display file couldn't cross that 32K barrier, right at 32K. Um, So it kept that low, but it used all that upper space for data.
Wasn't that an accounting program or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But there's a like Carl said, Super Star Trek. Anyway, sorry, Carl.
Yep.
Oh, it's all right. So there's that. There's some, and so just like Joe kind of mentioned, spilling the display file over the 32K boundary can cause problems, but there's some workarounds to allow that to happen and not have. I'm planning to include those mods in this, obviously, so that you can, choose to use that or not, because once you get into the upper 32K area, then things get interesting because that's when, A15 is active and that goes to the ULA. And that basically tells the ULA along with the M1 line, right, that, hey, we want to do some video generation. And so you kind of have to intercept, or not necessarily intercept, but you have to look at M1 to see if it's active or not, right? And so if it's not active, then okay, we'll let you access the RAM, right? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Let me
yeah,
get
yeah.
okay.
Sorry.
And then the upper 16K is kind of tricky because that I don't think you can really, or at least the top 8K, you can't really put anything there. I think you can put data there, but that's about it. You can't run any basic, obviously. You can't run any machine code because that's where the mirror for the character set has to be for the video generation routines to work properly. So I mean, you can use it for storage. Like I said, when the M1 line is not active, but you can't run any machine code and you can't run any basic up there. It's just basically for data storage. So, um, but anyway, I'll integrate all that stuff in there. We'll see how the M1 thing works. I've just built or just got the boards in for my internal mod. I know I was talking with Joe about this a little bit, but this internal mod, Derek's 81 kind of came up with it, but it actually ties into the A14 and A15 line on the ULA inside the 81. So it actually controls them, right? So instead of the Z80 having control of that, the logic that he put on this board controls it. So he basically controls. I ran it through some logic simulator to see what's going on there, and he basically controls the A15 line. He can make it active or not. He can make A14 active or not too, but the main thing is for A15. So that's unfortunately an internal only mod, right? Because you can't lift the pins on the ULA without opening the machine up. So I can't do that on this 1560 thing. So there's some extra logic there to kind of help hopefully fix that so we can actually do that on the RAM. So RAM's one thing, obviously. So another thing on there was, we talked about the joystick since we were doing, all these games on the clone cartridge thing. And so I found a project that somebody did that uses a couple of GAL chips or PAL chips. I mean, they're kind of getting discontinued now, but you can still get them. Anyway, that allow you to fully program, right, which keys you want the joystick to do. It comes with a little program that he wrote, so you've got to run that. And you can tell it what keys that you want it to do. And so basically, that's kind of the big limitation with the joystick, right? Was, well, how do we give it other keys, because some programs you can't change the keys.
Is Oh, Carl, your mic cut out.
Part of this, then I kind of, like you said, I threw that.
Carl, you cut out. You cut out again.
Came back with some suggestions, and one of them was kind of like I looked at maybe putting an RS-232 port on there. That may or may not happen because that's a little bit more involved than one might think. Because yeah, you can put an I/O port on there, make it a serial I/O port, but what is that going to do for you, right? I mean, what can you control with that? Sure, you can control a few things, but you're probably going to want to. Yeah, I kind of hear my headset clicking on, so I don't know what's going on with that. But anyway, maybe I'll get closer to the receiver over here. So
Mm.
anyway, I was thinking an RS-232 port, but then you got to start talking about, getting a USART or something like that in there, right? That can control that. And I was thinking, well, I got a bunch of 2050 modem boards around. So I could probably mimic, the IO logic that they have there to control the ports, and of course the USART chip that's on there. And maybe I'm going to have to throw some kind of clock in there because it needs, it runs on 4 megahertz, and then it divides that down to 1 megahertz, and then down to
What it needs for 300 baud.
yeah, I think 19 something kilohertz or something like
Yeah.
that. But so I might have to put all that stuff on this board, right? So allow you to at least have an RS-232 port. So that's why I don't know if we're going to get there yet. I mean, how big is this thing going to really be with all this logic? I've kind of decided that I'm going to make a double decker board. There's going to be a lower board that actually plugs into the system and has probably the RAM on it, and maybe the joystick stuff. And then there'll be an upper board that obviously kind of plugs into that board, and that'll have the joystick. The cartridge ports, because it's also going to have the cartridge. The 1510 stuff will be part of this, and the ROM replacement cartridge will be part of this as well. So you'll kind of have the smorgasbord, as they say, in this, one machine or with one expansion. And I know somebody brought up like the ZX Westby and things like that, but
Yeah, that requires
to
internal though.
right. I mean, you could probably run some ear and
It
mic
requires a
lines to
what,
this
David? What did you say it requires?
You have to
video.
open up the 20. I'm sorry, the ZX81 to hook up the Westby. It needs
Uh-huh.
to attach to a specific point on the circuit board.
I see.
Yeah, so that kind of throws that out of the picture. And then I think there was, some other more networky kind of things. I don't think that's really going to work out. The other thing was sound. So that's kind of, I think, the final thing that probably is going to get into this is actually we're going to use the same sound chip that the 2068 has, right? The AY38912.
Yeah.
And that obviously has a GPI port on it, because that's what the 2068 uses for the joysticks. And so this one guy that came up with that, I'm leveraging all these designs from other people, so it just kind of makes this thing faster to design. He actually makes that so that you can it goes to a SD card reader. And some other guy in Germany that kind of teamed up with him or kind of got on board with his project wrote some software to read and write to the SD card. So it'll be interesting to see, how that works. Because then potentially, we'll have the capability to for sure read, P files from the SD card, and I think he's gotten to the point where you can actually write to it.
Oh wow.
As well. So that'll kind of be, that's kind of uncharted territory. We'll see how that pans out, but I'd like to include that as well. I mean, the sound for sure, but since that kind of comes with it, we might as well throw it in there and see what sticks.
So Carl, this sounds like a lot of work. And we know that you're going to just take time off from your job to do this, right? You're just going to take like 2-3 week vacation and focus entirely on this, right? It's probably going to take you a while.
Yeah, it'll probably take a few months, but like I said, I've usually, now that I've gotten into this, this PCB, the PCB program, I've just been making boards left and right, not just for Timex stuff, but for other things as well. And that kind of brings up the fact that I threw something up on the forums too. With about a year ago, we were doing the 2050 modem to serial, RS-232 conversion. And when I started doing that, I couldn't build the boards, right? Wasn't familiar enough with EasyEDA or KiCad or any of that stuff to really make my own board. So I was doing it on breadboarding on a perf board, and oh my God, I started wiring that thing up, and man, I was just starting to pull my hair out on it. So it kind of fell off, my priority list there. But so I've made a board for that. That's already been finished. It's actually going to be shipped. So, I'll have that here in a few. I didn't rush that one really, but so I can kind of continue on with that project, and have a board, which will make it much, much easier to build. Although now looking at it after it's built, I think, because I kind of piggyback on where the USART chip is, right?
saw
That's where
that,
most of
yeah.
these things do. And I think I might have the sockets offset, the socket that goes to the PCB, the 2050, may be too far over to the left, because I want to use some of the holes that are on the PCBs. I think I have to drill one over here on the right side, but to hold the board in place. I mean, the socket, that'll be sockets are soldered down, so that'll be some mechanical, support. But
Let me interrupt you just for a second, Carl. So in order to do this, somebody would have to have a 2050, modem board with a working connection, the fire hose cable, as it were, to the ZX80. I just want to pose a potential idea to you. With your 1560 thing, perhaps an expansion bus, and then just take the essence of the 2050 modem and make it a card that would fit in the expansion bus.
It's possible. That's kind of the other thing when I was talking about the RS-232 port.
Yeah.
Kind of just taking the selection logic or the IO logic, right? So where it talks to the chip on ports, 73 and 77, I think it is.
Yep.
And then, like I said, I might have to bring over some of the crystal, the clock circuitry. And, basically you wouldn't have a modem, because don't really need that these days, right? I mean, that's kind of, unless you're Adam and you have a VoIP line or somebody still on.
I'm limited to 300 baud on that thing.
But unless somebody still has a landline that's,
I guess even real true landlines are limited now because they're digitally equipped somewhere down the line. And
but there are other devices, like there's this doodad that somebody designed that has RS-232 on one side and talks Wi-Fi on the other.
Right.
And it may be more accessible if you don't have a dependency of a.
There's also the FujiNet too, which has been, I think it's been brought up here.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody started working on the FujiNet for the 1000.
No, not that I know of, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened.
Yeah,
it's pretty active.
Well, I did look at that too, because somebody brought that up as well, right? And I'm like, well, FujiNet is kind of its own thing, right? I mean, if you look at the ones that are done, which is basically, I think the one I was looked at is the on the Atari, right? The 800 and the 600, that plugs into the parallel bus that's on the back of those machines. It's kind of a self-contained unit, right? And so for me to incorporate that into the 1560 design is just, I don't think that's gonna, I think eventually if that ever gets off the road, it gets off, the ground, it'll be something you plug into the expansion bus anyway. Right. So at least the 1560 will have an expansion, so you can connect something to it. Go ahead.
So the FujiNets do have the advantage that they basically are designed to work with serial and plug in the devices that they've created essentially so far. They pretty much either work with serial or work with the floppy controller if there was one. In the Apple II, you need a particular version of the floppy controller to use it. And the Apple II one is, last I played with it last year, is sort of half-baked. It's not a fully ready-to-go product. The Atari one is done, and the Coleco Atom one, I think, was the first one that they did. And both of those, I think, use the serial port in some form or another to do their stuff, to talk to the computer and the FujiNet.
Right.
So that at least has the advantage that it's in the same direction that you're heading with the modem. But of course, as you say, the FujiNet is a different ballpark entirely. It's whatever that FSP32 processor is, and it's kind of designed. Now, so again, the FujiNet is cool because what they're trying to do and what they're heading in the direction of is true interoperability between the different platforms through the FujiNet method.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually developing games that you would be able to play on an Atari and on a Coleco Atom, both with FujiNets, through the FujiNet protocol stack. And you'd basically all be playing the same game as a multiplayer game through that kind of device. And I mean, the idea is that you be playing it with other people on the internet who are also
Right.
connected through their FujiNet to whatever the server is that you're on. So that's kind of the cool part of the FujiNet. Certainly for this kind of project, what you're trying to do is a little bit in a different direction than where FujiNet is going. But it'd be cool to keep an eye on it because the capabilities and the ideas that the FujiNet has are still a really cool thing. So,
Well, then kind of what I'm getting from all of this is, the interest in an RS-232 port on this thing is probably fairly high, right?
Yeah.
So we probably should, or I should probably, put some more effort into actually, like I said, basically pulling the guts of some of the stuff off the 2050 and putting it onto this expansion unit. Just at least source to get an RS-232 port, not just a serial port, but a true RS-232 port.
And Carl, we do have, as absurd as it sounds, we do have an 80 column terminal program for the 1000.
Okay.
That, with your hardware, it'll require your hardware. It'll require RAM in the second 8K chunk. But yeah,
Okay.
it does 80 columns. It's written by Fred Nackbauer.
So basically, yeah, it looks like we're going to, the reason I kind of want to do the 2050 is because we have a terminal software for that. It's already written for that port and it works. So we'll have something that we can interface with, right? We won't have to develop the software for this RS-232 port. We'll have something already at least. And, it'll be interoperable with, the 2068, but, because it has this terminal software too that uses the same, the 2050 works on either one. Okay. So I guess basically I'll kind of plan on putting the RS-232 port. I know I had a big old list of things in the forum posts that I wanted this thing to kind of do. And, I kind of think the only thing I'm really going to add to that, I guess, is this RS-232 port. We'll try and get that on there. So,
cool. Carl, I wish you luck. I fully understand, having a nice long dev list like that versus, the time in one's schedule.
Yeah, well, luckily a lot of this is leveraged, so it's not like I'm coming up with it from scratch. So that's going to be helpful. It's just board layout, right? See what we can fit in there. How big is this thing going to be? I'm trying to make it about 5 inches long, and like I said, a double stacker.
Cool.
Right, so it won't be any, something horrendous off the back.
Cool.
And another project was, I don't know that, just so we can kind of cover this all in one shot here is, Adam had his, when we were over there last time to his house, all three of us, we had some joystick issues. And so I started, one thing with that was
port issues that we thought, not joystick
well, right,
issues.
right. Yeah. I wrote up a little test program and I tried both of those joysticks that we were using, and it seems to work fine. So I don't know, it even measured with the with the DMM, to see if there was a short.
Yeah.
On the up line or it was left line, and
correct,
everything measured okay. There was no short or anything. So I mean, I'm not surprised it worked because of that, but I don't know why it didn't work over at Adam's place. Maybe he's got some
altitude.
gremlins over there.
It's the altitude.
But so I think something up with capacitors came up, right? So
I was talking about, well, you can't see what I'm pointing at, but I have my other 2068 hooked up, and I was wondering if maybe I'd have to check the capacitors.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and so
That's
you checked the capacitors on that one and said that all of them were good, and you suspected mine should all be good too. So I've been using it. It has like the worst picture quality out of composite of all the 2068s I've had. and that's saying quite a
Well,
bit actually. But
right. There's
yeah.
probably something in there because there's a big cap inside the modulator area. It's a 1,000 microfarad that's right on the composite line. So if that's kind of failing or something like that, then that could be causing some video issues. But amongst other things, maybe your 12 volts is kind of messed up on that machine. Who knows? It could be any. Usually when those capacitors start to fail, they will get higher ESR, right, equivalent series resistance, and that'll start to pull down the power supply, right, because now you're just basically heating up the cap, right, because it's a resistor. And then that kind of snowballs into the effect of it getting worse and worse and worse, because now that it's heating up, that's not good for an electrolytic cap. You don't want those things to heat, because then they'll start to, they're just going to keep going or getting worse, right? So anyway, like I said, I've never really seen too many bad ones, because that's way, we're talking early 80s here. Most of the caps back then were made pretty well. I'm not saying that they don't fail. Sure, they do, but it's, as a general course, I haven't really seen a lot of bad caps, at least on the 2068. Now, when you talk to ZX Spectrum,
Different issue. Yeah.
yeah, those guys use the gellet caps, and they certainly have problems, with those caps on the Spectrum, and maybe even in, because the ZX81 use the same company, right? So, but it has far fewer caps
But
in it than
so
the
here's the
Spectrum.
irony, Carl. The 81 and the Spectrum were both assembled by Timex,
Hmm.
but designed by Sinclair, right? And
Right.
Sinclair spec, it's clearly spec the parts that they wanted. But when Timex, came time to design and build their own, they spec'd different capacitors.
Yeah, it was made in Korea, right? So
Yes.
these caps that are in these that I've seen, the black ones, they say Samyang on them,
Mhm.
right? And I was kind of thinking to myself, well, that's probably some third party cheap brand. But come to do a little research on it, it looks like it's a Korean version of the Nippon Chemicon,
Okay.
which is a very highly it's a pretty highly regarded good capacitor, the United or the Nippon Chemicon, United Chemicon, because it has the same Chemicon symbol that
Okay.
Samyang is inside. So I was kind of like, that looks like a Nippon Chemicon symbol, and that's come to find out that they were a Korean subsidiary that made those capacitors for basically Nippon Chemicon in Korea,
Oh, wow. Okay.
right? So it was a Korean version of Nippon Chemicon. That's why they use the same outside symbol, but they just put Samyang inside. So those should be pretty good. I've never really seen those go bad. And anyway, so you can see all the ESR readings, the delta T's, and that's kind of what I do a lot of times when I'm recapping things, because I need to see, well, are they really bad? And or are we good enough where we could uh-oh, he put him in there.
I put it, yes,
Goodness.
per Adam's suggestion. This is hung off of the
You have
reference
to
and
remember that
technical
they were
information.
built to different budgets.
What was that?
Yeah.
The budgets, the Timex had to make money making them for Spectrum.
Mhm.
So the budget was different than Timex for Timex.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, there's all the raw data, which, I'm kind of big guy on, we need data, right? I can't just say, well, these capacitors look good. That's
Mhm.
fine. They can look fine on the outside, but they can be horrible on the inside, just like a lot of people these days. But anyway, um, so the capacitor thing kind of came out of that. And then I went ahead and, like I said, tested the joysticks, and I can't see anything wrong with that. And I'm going to, like I said, put in a 12 volt and 5 volt, outboard switching mode power supply, kind of similar thing. You wrote up an article on that, David.
Yeah. But
So
you said you're going to isolate the
right.
op amp in the 78S40 and see if it will still be
Right.
staticky.
So I'm going to socket both
Wait,
of those chips.
you're going to do, what are you going to do?
Okay, so here's the interesting thing. There's a TI, Texas Instruments, switching power supply controller chip in the 2068. It's the part number is 78S40, if I recall correctly. And you know, 90% of the chip is supporting the switching power supply design, but there's a little op amp in there, a little thing that will amplify a signal, and the audio from the 8912 chip is fed through that and then goes into that little tiny speaker that's on the bottom of the 2068. And many 2068s have an audible hiss when you are using them. Now, I disconnected mine a long time ago, but actually pulled one off the shelf a couple weeks ago that somebody else had sent me, and it doesn't hiss. So this is the weird thing: is not everybody has the hiss, and I think I don't remember who, somebody on the list said, well, I don't hear that. Maybe it was Ryan. But the theory, because the audio signal goes from the 8912 through that op amp to the speaker, so there's not a lot of opportunity. The 8912 itself is not hissy. The speaker itself is not going to generate hiss, so that leaves us with the op amp for where that noise comes from. And so Carl wants to, what he said he was going to do in his email was disconnect all of the portions of the 78, the chip that does the power, the switching power supply, but just leave the op amp portion connected and powered and see what happens.
Yeah, because it's really the design. I think the op amp is there for another feedback loop or something like that for the switching. Too. Yeah, for the switching power supply. It wasn't. Timex kind of got creative there and said, "Well, hey, we got this op amp in this chip. Let's use it."
I agree totally with you on this, Carl. Like, oh, hey, let's use this op amp.
Right. And it's kind of strange because the op amp is totally isolated from the switching regulator portion. Now, granted, you have to realize they're on the same die.
That's exactly right. That's what I was thinking. Yep.
Right. They're on the same die, so any kind of noise is going to be really, really easy for it to bleed over to the op amp because it's on the same die. The other thing is, like I said, the op amp power supply and ground and everything is totally isolated from the switching regulator portion. So that's kind of how we can do this, right? Because I'm going to socket his regulator chip. I'm going to socket the sound chip so that I can pull the ABC lines. So that's kind of the other thing we're getting to is a stereo mod, right? Yep. And so once I socket the power chip, I can just basically splay the pins out from the socket for all of the regulator stuff. So none of the regulator stuff will actually touch the chip anymore. Right?
Yeah.
Just leave the op amp stuff in there.
Carl?
Yep.
Hi, this is Gustavo. One of the solutions is if you use LM386 with the Zener diode and bit capacitor to avoid the noise over the VCC, you can clear audio and not use the power amp used on the regulator. The regulator maybe Texas think that this as a comparator or whatever during the power supply environment, not for use in a different part of the circuit. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure that's that's the design of that op amp was made for something to do with the switching regulator, not to be used as an audio amp. Timex just decided they were going to do that, but like I said, it's kind of ironic that that op amp is totally separate. You can power. It's got its own power. It's got its own ground, and of course it's got the the non-inverting input, the inverting input, and of course its output. That's basically it. And so by totally disabling the switching regulator, you're not going to have the switching noise, right? The frequency that the switcher's working at, which I think contributes to the hiss. That's my thinking. And so I'm going to hook it up to my capture device before I do anything. This machine that I have from Ryan I don't particularly hear the hiss very much. So it's one of those machines that's luckily doesn't have a lot of hiss.
Are you talking about my machine?
Right, the one I have here.
Okay.
Now I've heard machines that
Don't say it's Ryan's. Don't say it's Ryan's. It's my machine.
That's Adam's machine, right. But I have heard machines that you turn them on and it's just night and day different. You can hear the it's it's a hiss in there, and some machines have it and some machines don't. But I think on a even the ones that don't audibly have it, it's still there, right? And so if you start putting this signal into outboard equipment, kind of way we're going to do with the stereo mod, then that's just gonna, you're gonna amplify that noise on your outboard equipment.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I wanted to try to knock two birds with one stone and see if this is going to actually help. So Gustavo mentioning, the LM386, that's a little amplifier chip that they've used for years, and I don't know if everybody remembers those little Radio Shack the little Radio Shack amplifiers that they used to make. They were little rectangular things. I think the later ones were kind of more square, but it was just a little amplifier, right? 9-volt battery. It had an input and a little volume control on off button on it as well. So, they use that LM386 in a lot of things. So, if this doesn't really help that, then that could be an option, but that would require another PCB. I don't want to just kind of attach that in there with fly leads or something like that, but so we want to have a PCB to mount it on and all that kind of thing. But we're going to try this first and see. I'm fairly confident that it'll take the hiss away, because it won't be using the switching regulator part of it anymore. So there's no switching frequency, turning the pass transistor on and off.
Hey, Carl, I'm going to cut you off.
Okay.
Because Joao from the Load CX Museum and Johnny Red and Hugo are all here today.
Oh, okay.
I would love for them to talk to us about the Load CX Museum, the documentary that was made and recently shown on Portuguese TV, and also it is Game of the Year time.
Right.
So,
sure,
Joao?
Sure.
Hi, David. Hi,
How are you doing?
All good, all good.
Awesome. I'm going to spotlight you. So
okay.
if Johnny or Hugo want to jump in, I'll spotlight them. I'll try to do my best to switch.
Yeah. So I saw your invitation as usual. I noticed you had there the thing about the Timex documentary, and so I thought I should try to make myself available in case there were some questions or curiosities, things, let's say, behind the scenes or something like that. But so perhaps before that one, we can address the GOTY, because the GOTY, I think it's simpler. So some years ago, we were challenged to pick up a project that started from a Portuguese blog called Planeta Sinclair. It's a blog written in Portuguese, but with millions of views. So nowadays, with automated translation, things work more or less okay. And so my friend André Leão is the guy behind the project, and they write all about Spectrum games and things related to that. And since 2016, that they came up with this idea of choosing the game of the year, and then came up with different categories and all of that. More or less in 2020, they approached us and asked if we were already collaborating a lot. André is the guy that does software preservation in the museum. Like Hugo is the guy behind the hardware preservation. So they're part of the team. And so André challenged us to try to pick this to a new level. And being a fan of some glamorous galas and stuff like that, immediately I said, this has to be the Oscars of the ZX Spectrum. I have to say, I don't play much. I don't care that much about games, but I do like to set up a nice show. So we had to do it in the first 2 years. We had to do it online because of the pandemic. And my first thing that I said from the very beginning was, I won't rest until I have in Cantanhede, which is the city where the museum is located, until I have in Cantanhede a red carpet. That was my first goal. And the fact is that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we had the red carpet there for the first time. with some places to take some nice pictures. Of course, it's not yet an event where all the game creators are coming from around the world, but I think yesterday's edition is changing that. So 2 years ago, we started doing this live. We broadcast it over the YouTube, so you can find it in the live section of our YouTube channel. Normally, it's a ceremony with around 2 hours and a half, something like that. So it takes some time. There are normally, let's say, 12 categories, one being the main one, the game of the year. Then we have 3 technical ones: best graphics, best loading screen, and best sound. And then you have games according to the categories: puzzles, arcade, adventure, whatever. There's an international jury that's fundamental to us. So it's not something that a bunch of 2 or 3 friends got together over a weekend and decided. No, you have something like 12 people or more in the jury. You have people from Russia, from Spain, from UK, from Portugal. I might be forgetting some, but from all people from the community. And so after the year ends, they have 3 weeks more or less to vote on the games, and they will identify the finalists, the nominees of each category, and then in the gala is when we find out who won and all of that. So that's what we did yesterday. So I'm a bit tired, I have to say. For the first time, it was not something we started thinking in January. No, we were already working on this by the end of the year, because we wanted to take this to another level. And there were a couple of things we did that I believe show that. First thing, now the ceremony is spoken in English. That was the thing we changed this year. And we saw because you have, I don't know, 100 people or a little bit less in the museum on the day, but you have some hundreds of people following and interacting in the chat. So I haven't seen it now, but yesterday when I went to bed, there were already I don't know, 700 views on the video or something like that, which is interesting, very interesting to this.
Well, I have you make
Yes.
it seem like how many did you expect? Far less views?
In previous years, we had less.
Okay.
Remember, we're talking about, so we are all passionate about the Timex or the Spectrum computers, but this is a niche. We know we're a niche.
Okay.
And when you're doing this from Portugal, when some game creators some time ago, they didn't even knew that the games were nominated and all sorts of things, but then they start getting excited. Then in the end, they get a diploma saying they were finalists or whatever, and they start showing it. So it's creating a wave of interest around this. And now that we switch it to English, it was very important. The best thing we see is the interaction between the game creators and their supporters in the chat. And yesterday went perfectly. We didn't need to moderate anything special. People were nice. People incentivize each other. So it's very nice. We did other things. We had a professional. So the hosts on the stage were myself and a friend of mine. She's a reporter working with video games in one of the national TV channels in Portugal. All the categories are presented by digital creators, people related to the spectrum, to games, that we invite. So just like in the Oscars, you have 1 or 2 people coming to the stage and presenting the category. We started doing one thing that I believe is also very, very important. And I have to say, we copied it from the Game Awards, from the ceremony, the real, let's say, GOTY, which was the fact that now we also announce some new things that are going to happen in the year in the ceremony. So we had 4 games that from 2025, 3 out of 4 haven't been launched yet. Still, we had some teasers or some gameplay to show. And you'd be surprised if you see the transmission, you'll see it, but you'd be surprised with the quality of teasers for teasers trailers of ZX Spectrum games. It's crazy. Well, same way that in the 80s we would have some amazing drawings or paintings, illustrations of that were they exaggerated the quality of the game. So when you look at the game, well, probably you thought about Barbarian, you imagine Maria Whitaker or whoever it was, and then you saw the game and things were a little bit different. The same is happening with these trailers. I got surprised. I got excited with them. They create all the context for the game, so it's very, very nice. And so that's a very good thing, because then people will start looking at the GOTY ceremony as what is happening this year? What are the major things being launched? And so I think I think it was a big step this year in terms of the further internationalization of the event. I just saw that David already shared the video. Thank you, David. It's a 3-hour thing, but
you're up to 1,000 views.
2,000 already?
1,000.
1,000. Yeah. It will be 2,500, something like that, at least. I expect in a few days. So I think that's more or less it. So unless someone has questions, I didn't prepare anything more about the GOTY.
Okay, so Joao, we'll let people ask questions in a second, but when it comes to the documentary part,
yes,
the vast majority of people who are going to see this, the recording of this meeting are going to have no idea about that. So, well, let's see if anybody has any questions first about the Game of the Year thing.
Okay,
Adam, you always have questions.
I guess I do always have questions. So how many people actually showed up that were local? Did anyone come from out of the country?
So out of the country, for the first time, we had a game creator coming from Spain to be in the session. It was the first time it happened. So in the 2 previous sessions, it never happened. Also, remember, we don't have that many games from Portugal, which means you don't have that many game developers in Portugal that could join us. And so for the first time yesterday, you had one game developer locally there.
Did he have to win because of that? He showed up, so he's like, I need an award.
No, and we didn't even knew that he was going to be there. Of course, I can make some jokes about that because I'm not part of the jury. So if I say, oh, I could have persuaded the jury, then you know I'm joking because I'm not part of the jury. But yes, I think it should have won. But jokes apart, I think he got 3rd place on the puzzle category, a game called Blonde. And he came from Toledo in Spain with some other friends. So it was nice to see some international visitors there for the event. But remember, we're talking about games for the Spectrum. We're talking about a niche thing, a thing that people do on their free time. So we're on the right track, but we need to grow much more for what we want to do, at least.
Very cool.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
If not, we can move to the other thing.
Yeah. So talk to us about the documentary. How did this come together? I know it took quite a while to make it, and then, post-production and scheduling and et cetera, so more time to get on TV.
So, yeah, more than the time it took to make it, it was the time it took for it to go live, because we don't control that part. So the documentary was, I don't know if I can say 1 year, but many months waiting to be aired
actually, no one has said what the documentary you're talking about really is.
Sorry, Adam?
Why don't you describe what the documentary is?
Okay.
And then
absolutely.
Yeah. So the documentary is basically a thing called Timex Portugal, An Untold Revolution. Something along this line, translating it literally. So it's the story of what happened in Timex Portugal, not only about the computers, also about the watches, the work for IBM is referred slightly, Minolta, UG in Sweden, which was a Swedish POS manufacturer to whom they worked also. And so we came up, and by we, I will clarify that, but we came up with a professional documentary made for the national TV that hired us and I will clarify that us, hired us to do this work, to tell the story about some Portuguese engineering that many people in this country don't know that it happened back in the 70s and in the 80s. The documentary is spoken by the former employees that worked there. So there was a selection of 7 or 8, 9 former employees that worked there in the several phases of the factory. And they were invited to go into the old premises and give interviews about all of this. There was a professional crew, a company called Galgo, that they were the ones challenging us to do this, and I'll explain that later. But so they were the responsibles for coming up with putting the story together. And basically, and this has to be said here, because if you go and see the documentary, well, probably some of you will come afterwards and say, oh, I was expecting to know more details about this computer, so I would expect you to enter in detail on what is the tenet. They mentioned the tenet, why didn't you explain that more? This is not a documentary made for people like us that are here today on a Sunday talking about Timex computers from so long ago, assuming they stopped in the 80s, which is not true, as we know. But so this is something done for mainstream audience, for people to know, for people in Portugal mostly, to know, okay, something special happened in a part of Portugal in the 70s, first with mechanical watches and then digital quartz watches, electronic watches also. And then there was a second life in that factory in the 80s, where they were doing stuff for this very important ZX Spectrum computer. And they also developed their own models called the Timex computers, 2068, 2048, blah, blah, blah. Not to mix up, as we know, with the Timex Sinclair 2068 that, like Carl was saying, was assembled in Korea. This is what to expect. Mainstream story of what happened in that unit, aired 2 weeks ago on national TV. How did we get involved in this? So a guy called me, I don't know, 2 years ago. We had some mutual friends, and he told me, and he asked this mutual friend, if they could share my phone number, which of course I said, yes, no problem at all. So we had some friends in common. We start talking, and he says, look, my father-in-law told me that there's a museum about the ZX Spectrum in Portugal. That sounds like a very strange story. How the hell, can you tell me more about that? And so I start talking with him, and he says, oh, there must be a good story there. Look, we're talking about companies that are always trying to chase a good story to tell and to create content about it and to sell that content to TVs, to Netflix, to Amazon Prime, and those kind of things. And so I started talking with him, and I told him, yeah, I think the story of the museum is nice, and there's this story and that story. You could do a documentary about the ZX Spectrum, for example, but I knew that there were things like that being done in the UK. I think it was Carl that bought the Rubber Key Wonder. I saw some of the messages. We are part of the Rubber Key Wonder also, so I knew that was being done in UK. You cannot expect to do a documentary on the ZX Spectrum from Portugal if you are trying to reach Clive Sinclair, Chris Curry, Rick Diggs, all the guys that were in UK. So if our British friends are doing it, they are better qualified or prepared to do it. So let's leave that part to our British friends, and then let's focus on what we have that is special in Portugal, which was the story of Timex Portugal, because technology went to Argentina, to Poland, to USA, to Portugal, and many other places. Mm-hmm. And so I asked him, have you heard about the story of Timex? And he said, no. And then the guy realized, and this is the funny part, he said this in an interview on the TV. The guy realized he lives 5 minutes from the former facilities of Timex in Portugal. And it's like when everything starts aligning together, and you notice, okay, there's a good story. I live just next door to where this happened some years ago. Probably there's something here that I should explore. And so after trying several things, he was able to get a contract with a Portuguese public TV channel to get some budget to do this documentary. Obviously, this was only possible. Why? Because I had done the work. When I mean the museum. So João Encarnado also, even before me, João Encarnado started doing that work of, just like David does there, identifying the key individuals and start creating the network that then allows you to pick up the phone and say, I need you guys to tell your story. We need to do something about this. And so because of this network, because of this opportunity, we invited some key individuals that were good storytellers, that had the marketing director, the former production director. So they had roles that justify their presence there. One of the individuals that was interviewed, the oldest one that is there, Luis Moisão, he passed away in the meantime. So he saw the documentary because we had two premieres before going live, private events. So we went to the former Timex facilities with 200 former employees or 150 former employees, and all of them had the opportunity to see it there. And then we went to a cinema in Lisbon for another private event where we invited several people from the industry to tell them about this. So this is more or less the story of how it came a reality. I have to say, it's a dream come true. It's, if someone told me in 4 years you're going to have this museum, you are going to have people like Hugo joining you. I didn't knew Hugo 2 years ago, or I met him 2 years ago, and I only say Hugo because it's one person that is here and that I didn't knew 2 years ago. I knew João Encarnado, but not Hugo. And so you get people coming together to the museum. We start doing things. We have the opportunity to tell this story to the entire country. And it's a dream come true. What I told to the guys was, it's on my bucket list, but I know we need to get sponsors. We need to get funds to do this. So if you can get it, I said this to the company, then we are willing to do that. And they could get it. And so we did our part. We walked the talk. So having said this, we immediately decided to subtitle the work in English. The TV channel was not expecting that. We did it in the museum. It may not be perfect, but I think it should be pretty acceptable. We convinced the documentary. It's on a player, an app, a web app that the TV channel has. I've checked with David Anderson and others that you can access from anywhere, so they didn't restrict it, or else you would need a VPN, but it wouldn't be a problem. Of course, we couldn't put it on YouTube. I think it's there already, but we have nothing to do with that. And what we did was to convince the TV channel to put the English subtitles there. And this happened 1 week ago, I think. And this is basically now a new baseline. So everyone that wants can look at it. David just put the link there. So it's 1 hour. It's less than 1 hour documentary. I didn't say. I'm somehow, well, they used me as kind of how do you say it in English?
The narrator.
Narrator?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I became the narrator of the story. Some people make jokes because I'm wearing shorts there, and I'm very informal on those things. But there is one thing I would like to say that I believe it's interesting, because when I saw it the first time, I think there's a lot of emotions going up and down when you see it. There's hype, then you get frustrated because things are torn apart, then there's something exciting happening, and blah, blah, blah. And when I hear myself talking there, my first feeling was I didn't knew that I knew so much about this. What I mean is this: there are things there that I say that if you ask me out of the context, probably I wouldn't remember. And the merit of that, it's not mine. it's totally from the company that did this. So how did they do this? And I think this is a nice touch to tell of the behind the scenes. So we were there for 2 days recording. And they did one thing, which was they recorded all the interviews except mine. I was left for the end, which means that when they made me the interview, I have been 2 days, almost 2 days, hearing stories, hearing details, people telling me that I started working with 14 years old, but I was working already for 2 years before, blah, blah, blah. So all of that made that information to be very alive
fresh.
in my mind, fresh, yes, precisely, in my mind. And so it became much more easier to make the connections between all the things they did. And I think the merit of that is from the company, Galgo, that did this. And yes, I think I can try to answer any questions. João Encarnado was there also. In parallel, we did some other interviews that are not on the documentary, but for the museum. That's a different thing. We will release them eventually. We were waiting for this on the national TV to go live before, because it's more important. But this is it. So questions, comments?
Can I add something, João?
Yes, please do.
Hi guys, so pleasure to be here again. Let me just add something that adds to the modesty of what João had said, but also trying to enrich the experience of looking at the documentary and trying to get you guys to look at it and to showcase it to your friends without spoiling the contents. So one of the things that does come easily when you look at it, and while I do love hearing João talk about the museum and talk about the whole Timex experience and giving you a guideline throughout the whole story, I don't think he would mind me saying that the real stars are the ex-employees, the former employees of the documentary. And what makes it magical? What makes it magical is that they're telling it in the first person. So they're actually guiding you through many years, and these were very complicated years in Portuguese history, because the factory went through the Carnation Revolution in 1974, and through a revolution that basically halted its production. And they tell these stories, which are heartfelt stories, on the first person, and you were actually looking at the few people that experienced it firsthand. And so I believe for me, what really got me, and I wasn't there in the day of shooting. It was my kid's birthday, and I actually went being a father on that day, which, well, I still believe.
Which you regret.
I still believe it was the correct choice, though I do regret not being there. So I wasn't there on the day of shooting, so I didn't go through the process João was going through. And when I looked at it, it's very heartfelt. There were moments which, well, they're not tearful in the sense that it's not your tears, but you feel the weight, the gravitas of the whole thing. So it's really well told. It goes through the two lives of the factory. The first life, the room regarding the watches and the watches period, and then the computers and the electronics. And it's if you're able to look at it and to watch it with your family, I would seriously advise you to do so, because it's a family story mostly.
My wife and I will watch it tonight. Ha ha ha.
Nice. Let us know what you think afterwards.
So, João, we've talked a bunch, and you mentioned a lot of people whenever we talk. You mentioned a lot of people who worked at Timex, and for me, that watching the video, the part that sort of gave me the chills were like, oh my God, there's that person that João told me about. Oh my God, there's the other person that he told me about.
Yeah.
This is the engineer.
Yeah. All the three names from engineering that are there, like Rui Morgado I mentioned, but mostly we spoke a lot about Pedro Esteves and Luís Bandeira. They were there.
Yeah.
Luís Bandeira talks with a Brazilian accent because he moved to Brazil many years ago, but he's Portuguese. So yeah, it's what Hugo was saying. It's on the first person story. There were others that could be there. They are, for example, they are not there, but for those that, well, most of you saw the Tenet mini documentary amateur that we did, so nothing compared to this one. but still an amazing story. And many others are there. Abiliu is there. There's a few others there. So yeah, that's what makes this so special. What Hugo said is totally correct. They are the stars. This is their story. We weren't there. We were kids back then, most of us. But you know, and sometimes I tell this to people. I never went to Timex in those days. So first time I went to Timex location, Timex factory in Portugal, former Timex factory, was 3 years ago, more or less, when I met Rosalina and Pedro Esteves. And Rosalina is one of the interviews and the person that has the name in our museum because she helped us to connect with everyone. And you know what? I don't like to go there. I feel her pain when I go there because she's the one that lived there, that the house is no longer there. And even though it's not my story, it affects me. So I have mixed feelings when I go there. So it's very strange. So the fact is, what I felt in the last years, now Hugo is feeling because he's much more involved. João Encarnado also. But so Hugo has been talking a lot with Rosalina and all the others. So we won hundreds, 100, 200 friends with the age of our parents, and they treat us like we were there working with them side by side back in those days, and that's very strange for us. It's like it's the same when we had the opportunity, David, to talk with Danny Ross.
Yeah.
Or I had the opportunity to interview, and Gustavo is here, so I can announce this. We haven't said it yet, but when I had the opportunity to interview Hugo Mazer, who was one of the founders of the company in Argentina that sold the Timex, the Cerbeni computers. He's coming to the museum this 28th of March for the first time also. So the fact is, what you're doing in US, what we are doing here in Portugal, other people in Spain, other people in Britain, Uruguay is also very active on this. The fact that we are all, because of the internet, getting together is bridging all these kind of things. And eventually, I'm lucky enough to say that they will all appear in the museum. And that's a funny thing. So it justifies everything that we're doing. It justifies to be here on top of having some friends here. It justifies that we are bridging all these communities around the world around these tiny microcomputers that we love so much.
Yeah. And as both you and Hugo said, that first person, the person telling their lived experience is just absolutely powerful. You talked about the house, and that's early in the documentary about, the land that was used to build the factory, and the house that that Rosalina lived in. It's very powerful to see that.
The other thing, so Hugo mentioned the impact and the fact that these were very complicated periods in Portugal due to the Carnation Revolution. I don't know if you have this idea, not the revolution itself, but the impact on Timex was this. First period of the mechanical watches. So the factory was formally, it opened formally on 10th of December 1970, but it was operating since the beginning of the year. And it reached almost 3,000 employees in 4 years. So after 4 years, it was with more or less 3,000 employees, 2,000 to 3,000 employees. The revolution happens, and with several strikes and other things and requests for better wages, which, according to the people that work there, is a idea. So the conditions were above what you would expect. The fact is, they ended up with less than 100 people. And then they survived for 2 years or 3, and then they start getting back to life, and there comes the second phase with the computers. So all of this affected a lot the people that work there. And so one thing I was told, and I remember they left this in the documentary. I was told by them that during all the problems there were, because there was hijack. Yeah, hijack is the word in English. I think there was an hijack of the administration when they were claiming they needed better salaries and things like that. So it's a very complicated thing. And the fact is that during those months, after all that mess, the Timex Corporation, so Timex USA, let's say it like this, kept paying everything. So they never stopped paying to the employees or anything like that. But imagine, put yourself in their shoes. If you're an administrator, you have a factory in another country, you're having strikes, you're having problems everywhere, people saying they want to, I don't know, nationalize the company or something like that. Of course, eventually you'll have to do something. And it's a miracle that they survived, let's say it like that, and then they got a second life with the electronics, which is not, let's say, unexpected, knowing what was happening in Timex in other parts. So Timex was working on electronics, on the medical devices, and all of that makes sense. And then they just thought, okay, we have this unit in Portugal. It is said that the general manager, Antonio Gomes, was kind of a, let's say, a protege, or someone that was pretty much liked by Fred Olson and the team in US. And he was also very ambitious and very entrepreneur, which means he tried to get to Portugal everything he could. And that's a little bit how the computers start coming to Portugal first to work, as you and I know, David, with the team in USA to assemble the TS1000 and more, the 1500. And so things happen as we know. And this documentary formalized that story. Probably we will all, I think, like it. But more than to ourselves, is to our families, is to anyone, even if they don't like computers as much as we do.
Very cool.
I do have one question, Yao. So I had to look at this because this is pretty exciting. I haven't seen this documentary, but so it's definitely going to be on my list. But I did mention that yes, I got this the rubber keyed wonder, and I was kind of going through some of it. And I noticed that I saw you on one of the featurettes, right? So it must be an interview or the museum. So I kind of wanted to see if you could just talk a little bit about what that featurette is. So that, because I didn't watch it, I was just kind of skipping through the DVD, but I just noticed that you were on there, and I was like, hey.
Yes, of course. So, and that's one thing that puzzles me. On the evolution of the project, of the museum project, which is, there were many things that we did that I did not foresee, and that's a good thing in my opinion. So it's not like we've been planning with a business plan to reach this and that. No, we take all the opportunities we can. Regarding that one, I remember when it started. So there was a crowdfunding starting. This guy is doing it, the Gracious Films company, which is basically Nicola.
Again, is this just a tour of the museum? Is that what you're?
No. I'll explain what
okay.
is our role there. Sorry, Adam. So these guys from the UK, Gracious Films, Anthony and Nicola Caulfield, they're a couple. They created some other documentaries before. They made one that was important, called From Bedrooms to Billions, about the bedroom coder phenomenon. And so they thought about, so we had the 40 anniversary of the ZX Spectrum, and they thought we should do something to honor the story of it and tell the story of it. And they did a crowdfunding. And one thing that started happening, I remember I sent them an email saying, so who am I? I have the museum and blah, blah, blah. But I noticed that I was told that several friends of mine, I don't think Mark is here today, but Mark Klusterman, I haven't checked if he's here or not, but no. Mark is a good friend of mine. And I know sometimes he participates. And Mark was one of those doing what I'm about to say, which is people start sending messages to them saying, guys, the ZX Spectrum is a British computer, but it's not a computer that stayed in Britain. So you need, if you want to know the story of the ZX Spectrum and its impact in the world, you need to look at what happened in the Timex factory in Portugal, in USA with Timex, in Brazil with all the clones, in Eastern Europe, in Poland, blah, blah, blah. So at least a couple of friends of mine, without me asking, start sending messages, and they start being told that they should pay attention to some other things. And one easy way for them to get some of this information was to visit us or to interview us, try to get that information. For example, about Brazil, there are only two individuals that speak about it, me and Henrico Olivier, who is a Brazilian, who is the guy behind the Spectrum Next team. So he was also interviewed. So in the end, what happened? They sent a recording team, and this is a very funny story. They sent a filming crew to the museum to interview me. The guys were with an iPad there, and we had a Skype meeting going on. So I was answering questions in a Skype call, and they were filming. Now, the funny thing is this, and if someone told me this, I wouldn't believe it. The filming crew was basically the son of Pedro Esteves, who is the former production director at Timex Portugal. So the guy was with me in a lunch, this former employee of Timex Portugal, and he tells me something like this: "You're going to be interviewed for a thing in UK, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes. How do you know that?" "My son was hired to film that interview. He works on the field." And I was like, "What? Okay, come with him." And blah, blah. So he came. And so I always remember that I was talking about all this stuff, having a guy from Timex Portugal listening to what I said. And in the end, he told me, "Oh, this is more like this or more like that." So it was a funny experience, lots of pressure, but he's a nice friend now. But it was one of the first times I was with him. So that's the behind the scenes thing. Now, what is our role there? The hardest part for me to answer about that is this. There were several versions of the film, because we received the digital one. They burn one in the Blu-ray in DVDs, which I haven't checked yet. I went to the premiere in London to see it in the biggest cinema of the UK, which is in Waterloo in London, which is the BFI IMAX. So when I heard this was about to happen, I said, I'm going to get a flight and go to the UK to see it for sure. So I was there with the son of Clive Sinclair, with his cousin that I know, with Clive Townsend from Saboteur, Sandy White from Ant Attack, so many. Phil Candy, which was the colleague of Rick Dickinson, the designer of the computers that passed away. I was with Steve Vickers, the guy that wrote the manual and the ROM. I was with Richard Altwasser, the guy that created the hardware. So I met all of them. So if you follow the museum, you'll see the pictures from that moment. It was an amazing moment. I went with my wife there. It was very, very good. So in the end, I know that in the version in the cinema, we had less participation than in the first version that I saw. I do know that there's an extra in the Blu-ray or whatever, which is a visit to the museum. And I have to say that Anthony Caulfield, the director, is always very enthusiastic about the museum. And I was with him in an event in the UK, but it's really something that he does because he likes the museum. So I have to thank him for that. But in the end, our role there is pretty much the role of someone that runs a museum and talks a little bit about. So I think I'm referred, yes, I'm quoted, let's say it like that, or filmed, talking about the fact that the ZX80 flickers when you press a key. That's one thing that they use my footage. I speak about the clones in Brazil. So they use me to make that connection with clones in other parts of the world. I don't think they give much detail to Timex. Of course, they filmed about it, but I don't think in the end they gave that much detail about it, from what I remember. I don't know if Hugo or João Encarnado saw the movie and can comment, but I don't think there was much. So in the end, I don't know. I appear in 5 minutes in the 90 minutes or something documentary, but again, it could be 1 minute, it could be none, whatever it is, but it's a very positive, because remember, we are a museum in Portugal. We are not a museum in Britain, and this is a British documentary. The fact that they gave us some attention and they used us to tell the story is very, very, very positive. Very positive.
Yeah, because I know the featurette that's in there. I think it's about almost 20 minutes long,
That's
which is
about the visit
it's a
to the
tour.
museum. Yeah.
Yeah, the tour of the museum is kind of what it looked like to me.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to watching these things when I get some time. I got a lot of other things going on, but obviously, yeah, I'll appreciate everything you're doing down there. I kind of wish we had something here in the U.S. that was similar to that, but unfortunately, yeah, we don't.
It's look, it's I spoke this with David sometimes, and it's something we are here, and of course we will always be here, but we just need to find the right partners to try to do something international. I have the ambition of doing an exhibition in UK, or could be in US. The problem is, of course, the logistics is a nightmare. So how can we do such a thing? We would need to get, I don't know, the foundation of one of these big companies, to IT companies, to have some interest on this. One thing I've been thinking to explore in the museum now more and more is to try to do something with the companies that are still producing games nowadays. Companies that started back in those days and still exist. Like I know there's been a lot of layoffs and things like that, but Activision, Rare belongs to Microsoft now. Rare was Ultimate back in those days in UK. So there's a couple of them that still exist. So perhaps we can explore. The fact is, it's not easy. It's not easy to go to a Microsoft or Apple and say, oh, sponsor something about the Spectrum. Yeah, strange, I know. But if we find the context, look, we don't want to stay only within our premises. Yesterday, let me bring another subject to the table, but I think it helps. So in the GOTY, I didn't give highlight to that before because I don't think that was the most relevant. But we had a very important visit yesterday here, and I'm going to have lunch with him tomorrow again. So we have the one of the sons of Clive Sinclair visiting the museum and visiting Portugal. So, and the fact is, of course, he has the personal family tie with the family, with his family. But when you have people like this flying from the UK, visiting the museum, telling that it's an amazing opportunity for their kids to know more about their family, seeing objects they never saw before. The guy said again, so his cousin Grant Sinclair already said that 2 years ago. They never saw such a collection. And look, I'm not saying this because I want to brag and say we have the biggest collection in the world. I don't care about that. But we have a collection that is doing something that I believe makes a lot of sense, which is to tell the story to others and influentiate others and incentivize others to go into IT and electronics and all of that. So it shows that people look at us as something special, something different, and when they visit, normally they recognize is even better than what they probably thought. So I think the question is, when is David organizing a travel to Portugal from some of you?
And yeah, I do appreciate like you said, the software side of the thing, right? I mean, a lot of this is all hardware, and we don't really, I appreciate the fact that you're thinking about the software people, because I know when I think of my childhood, and the games that I played, companies like Scion, right? Companies like Ocean, companies like Quicksilva, what happened to these guys? I mean, there should be some homage paid to these people, because they made some really, really awesome products for this computer that we talk about. And I don't think, like you said, I don't think we really spotlight that side of the industry that much. And we know what happened to those people.
And if some of them are still active, then we have a window of opportunity to try to involve them.
Which is closing rather soon, right?
Yeah. Sorry? Or, kind of what happened to them, where did they go from there? Because I'm sure Quicksilva and, a lot of these weren't kids. I'm sure some of them probably were fairly young at the time, but, these are, middle-aged adults. So they'd be, our parents' age at this time, right? Where did they end up going? What did this do for their career? What's the stepping stone for them for, some of these companies?
Agree.
One of the question for these companies is how they can develop the games because the Sinclair is a proprietary video structure, is not an open format, and maybe they need a special hardware debugger or hardware tool to implement the games, because some games use full memory. You don't have space to put a compiler there. This is an open question for me, for these guys.
I will leave that one to Hug if he wants to comment, because I can't comment much.
I know how many people did develop games for these platforms, but I was actually picking on Gustavo's question, and I was raising the bar a bit, which was, how did the software guys at Timex and in the Timex Portugal team, for example, on the engineering team, how are they developing stuff like the Shadow ROM or the floppy disk system and so on? And I was looking into that story because I like Gustavo. I'm originally a software guy, and these are the things that caught my heart. And one of the things that I found amazing is that, I'll take the question twofold. One, regarding the games. Most of these guys were doing cross development. So most of these guys were, you would start in your bedroom and you would go doing the pokes and doing a small basic program that would create the first set of machine code onto the RAM. Then you'd build from that and create from there a program that would allow you to do a larger section of an editor or some routines that you would then save onto tape, and then you'd get those from tape. And you'd build this like tapestry, right? Like a rug patch in which you just join things one onto the other. And this was, the original amateurish, like bedroom coder style of doing this. But once you went to a company or doing some more serious work, most people, you already had the money from a previous launch, most probably, and then you'd probably get either some low level entry IBM clone or an Amstrad or something that in which you and most of these guys, they would patch up a serial interface towards the edge connector, and they would put out some circuitry in which they would be able to download from the other machine, where you already have a compiler and assembler, in which you'd be able to make the binaries there and then dump them onto the Spectrum memory for debugging, which was amazing. There are amazing pictures of all these cross-development systems. Now for the Timex folks, they graduated as well, and they were using these, at least in Portugal, they were using these Tektronix 8500 series network developer stations. This is really cool, and I cannot for the life of me get a hold of one of these on eBay or anything around. They vanished, which are, network stations. You'd have a central machine plus up to 4 or 5 stations, plus some kind of in-circuit emulator, like one of these chips in which you'd replace.
Are these CPM systems then? Is that what they were?
I believe they are derived. They're not CPM. This was running some kind of self-made operating system, probably based off CPM. I'm not sure. I never saw one running, but it looks like from the few screenshots I've seen. And you could get that. You'd be able to run on your station and then append to your station an in-circuit emulator, a nice system in which you'd replace the processor on, and you'd be able to run ROM from it artificially. You'd not have to burn a PROM to do that, and you'd be able to run and iterate rather fast. And this was the Rolls Royce, they say, because.
Sorry, is that the thing we have in the museum, right?
Not at all. You have a downgraded version of this. We have a nice circuit in the museum. Yes. Which is, we have one of these that Rui Morgado used. He used it at Timex, but it's a smaller station. It's not the networked version. They use the Tektronix. Tektronix went on, and the Tektronix was coming from oscilloscopes, right? And went on doing more developed oscilloscopes, but they had this thing into development stations, and I was trying to get hold of one of these because this should have been amazing, and also the source code would be stored on a central server. I would die to get my hands on one of those servers for the original Timex code that they built in these years. But there you go. These are the development practices back then, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you, Hugo, for the clarification. Thanks.
I'm just looking up. So I think, let me see if I can share a picture here.
You've got one of those Tektronix stations.
It's in my garage. Oh crap!
For real, or are you kidding?
Where do you live? What's the address?
Yeah.
I think I have your address for sure.
Well, I have a lot of
arrange
Tektronix.
something.
Yeah, I have a lot of Tektronix stuff, but I that's kind of a new one to me.
Yeah. Google Textronics 8000 series or 8800, 8500. There's a couple of versions. They had the central thing, and then they had different. It was modular. The fun thing is that it was modular, and it was they had versions for the Z80. They had Z80. I'm talking to Americans here, so they had versions for the Z80. They had version.
We can translate.
They had versions for the 8080. They had versions for the 6502. They had a series of modules that then you could plug in the ICE circuit and replace the processor and then do all of the fancy stuff. It's really, really cool, and you don't get it anywhere. The manuals themselves on eBay are $80 a piece. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I know I've got several of their logic analyzers, that they made logic analyzers back then, and some of them had modules where you could put a processor in, right? And yeah, I think you could actually like run code and you could see the, how the logic was going out on them. Yeah, so it probably is a derivative of that.
Absolutely.
With these, what do you call them? A network?
Well, they called it the development station, something along these lines. I'll send you guys the mailing list, the information I have on those, if you will let.
Yeah, the tech wiki appears to be down right now, but looking at the picture,
I'll just shoot it at the mailing list.
It's two 8-inch floppies for one of the example units. It's two 8-inch floppies, and then this, like Ugo's saying, this giant box that sits on top with all the CPUs and stuff. I think probably kind of similar to, except Tektronix made amazing equipment, but somewhat similar to the Zilog MDS development systems that they used at Timex in Middlebury.
Yeah. Another brand in this year was the HP. HP has
they made some
ROM emulator also,
development
and the CPU debugger.
Yeah, the HP ones I think probably were Unix based. The Tech may have been their own custom OS. I don't know. And the Zilog was its own custom OS.
Yeah, I know back in, when they were kind of doing their own OSs, I don't know what OS they put on the tech stuff, but eventually they kind of went to Windows. They were, they put hard drives in those things and they booted up Windows and ran on top of Windows.
Yeah. If there's a place that archives electronic design news from the late 70s and early 80s, that'll have ads from Tektronix for this stuff. Yeah,
I found some.
Okay. Yeah, that stuff was amazing to look at back then.
Yeah, it was only dream. I mean, even their scopes and stuff, scopes back in the 80s weren't cheap, right? I mean, a cheap scope back then would be $500, $600, $700, and it wouldn't really be that good. Maybe be a single channel 20 megahertz deal for $600. Now, gosh, crazy what you can get now for 150, $200.
I got mine for $200. It's a 200 megahertz 2-channel thing. It's crazy.
Yeah,
all these custom chips, the Chinese chips, absolutely.
Yep.
FPGAs.
The Chinese came in. You got Rigol and you got Siglent. All those guys came in and just kind of turned the industry on its head.
Joao, Ugo, thank you so much for showing up, taking time out of your schedule, because
I had a whole bunch of questions, but most
go
of them
ahead.
got answered.
I'm just being nice.
I'm curious. Since the documentary has aired, have people come into the museum and said, "Hey, I'm here because I saw this documentary," and is that something like that happened? Anybody?
Good question. It's a good question. I'm not there every day, so if it happened, I probably don't know, but not in a quantity that allows me to say that there's a cause reaction from that. We do get lots of comments online and things like that. Well, now that you say that, I did see a bunch of people saying, now I will go to the museum. I saw people saying that. If they really did already or not, I can't confirm. Remember another thing. Portugal is not a big country, but we are located in a small city. We are not in Lisbon or Porto, which are the biggest cities. So it's like opening a museum, I don't know, in New York and being in the East Coast, so you don't go the next day immediately in the West Coast. I mean, you don't go immediately to take that out from your bucket list. So sometimes it's something they say, okay, now I want to go more and more, but let's see when I can do it. But it's like even what we did yesterday with the Gotti. There's always two worlds. There's the physical world, the physical visitors, and there's the online. And both of them are very, very important to the visibility of the museum. For example, if we look at the museum only in terms of number of visitors, because of where we are located, of course, we are not a big museum. If we look at the projection, international projection it gives to the city, then we are probably the only project that could do such a thing. So there are several factors to consider.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
How far are you from, a big city?
Well, we have Coimbra, which is 20 minutes from here, but we don't have airport in Coimbra. So really big cities. In Portugal, you have two, Porto and Lisbon. Porto with 3 million inhabitants and Lisbon with 4 millions in the greater Lisbon area. We are located from Porto 1 hour and 15. We are located from Lisbon 2 hours, more or less.
Okay.
So it's not complicated to come here, but again, it's not like being in. I'll give the example of the UK or France or what any other country in Europe. Pick a plane, you arrive, you take a taxi, and you're there. No, there's some more logistics in between. If I may suggest one thing, which is a different team, and I will have to go soon. My wife, I think, is already having dinner, but it's more to Hugo. So Hugo, perhaps you could proactively give some feedback on how things are going with the board version of the Tenet. Gustavo is asking, and Province, other people.
Well, I unashamedly, I had been exchanging private messages with Gustavo all of this time while we were talking. So, guilty as charged.
Yeah, no, but perhaps you can share what's the status, because
absolutely
these things take time, and I think it's clear to become.
Absolutely. So this is what are we doing right now? So we took the first design that we discussed when we did the documentary, and we basically took a smaller footprint board. I had shown the board without any components when we had the first discussion, and we basically shrunk it down to SMD level components, except for two things: the ROMs, in such a way that our idea is that people can order the thing and people can take a very functionally equivalent wire by wire version of the Tenet board as it was designed by the original Timex engineers, and still maintaining the dual inline sockets for the EPROMs. Our idea is that you are able to take them out, to program it in an EPROM programmer, and tweak the software yourself. So you're still running Tenet, but you're able to evolve the system and you're able to improve on it. And we actually have a list of wishfuls that the original Timex engineers wanted to put in. So after we release the stuff, you guys are more than welcome to take your assembly skills for your Z80 code and improve on it, because we will be releasing it in some kind of LGPL license. So you're able to use it, improve on it. We only ask that you contribute back whatever you do. The idea here is that the current status, the thing is, well, hardware and software wise, it's pretty much done. What we're basically doing is in sourcing materials and fine tuning one component, which is the tricky one. We took the PALs. I don't know if you remember, we had two PAL components which had custom logic that we had to reverse engineer by brute force, and we took it and we put it on a single SCLD chip, which combines the logic for all of those in such a way that we use rather modern components. It really is becoming hard to source those PAL components. We originally had a design in which we maintain the PALs bit by bit. We don't maintain the physical form of the PALs, we maintain the logic. So we have a programmable chip in which the same formulas are there. They are just connected onto a different piece of silicon instead of the other two, because you wouldn't be able to source it in quantity nor use it in the modern environment. Even for programming, it's hard these days. So what we are expecting now is to have a few boards completed over the next weeks. We should have functional validation of the prototypes. If these go well, we will be basically putting them onto a nice case and then showcasing them onto the museum's website and announcing it as something that early adopters can pick. On this moment, we will be also on this first release. We will be releasing the artifacts themselves and our lessons learned, basically. So the ROMs, basically the stuff that we found regarding software related to it. And inclusively, I guess I don't have this specifically arranged with João, but I don't see anything against releasing the Gerber files for the boards themselves. We are not aiming to make money out of this. We're aiming to give two things. One, enthusiasts like you guys and us, easy access to pre-built components so that you don't have to tinker and solder with an iron board, with soldering iron. But if that's what triggers your buttons, man, you can take the Gerber files, make the whole thing on PCBWay or whatever, and iron away, solder away. So both options are valid. I don't see anything valid happening over the next 4 weeks, but after that, I believe you're starting to see something more popping out more often. Okay, so that's pretty much it.
From my experience, and because of all the different things happening at the same time in the museum, because remember, this is basically a volunteer-based project, so time is very limited. Family gets in the way. Other competitive objectives get in the way. And we do have some very big ones for this year, as Hugo knows, related to Timex stuff also. So the fact is, we don't like to move to new projects before closing the others. The fact is that this is taking more time than we wanted or planned. But okay, it will take a few more weeks or a couple of months. Eventually, what will be done is what Hugo said, and I agree with you. We don't do anything with the aim of making money. That's not the main purpose. We want to document it, share it, and then see where the community takes it, and allow us to focus in some other nice projects we still have to address.
Let me add something. We also want to do it right. Let me give you a very clear example. We were all pumped up saying, "Yeah, we have the whole tenant thing." On the first documentary you saw, the one in which we showcased the Timex employees reacting to it. We were convinced that we had the whole thing. A few weeks after, a new unit pops up. One guy goes on a Facebook and puts out a picture stating, "Hey, do you know?" Yeah.
There was one guy with one and another guy with three.
Absolutely, yeah. and they put a picture stating, "Do you know what this Timex extension thing is? These are ticker computers. I don't know what." And I'm looking at the picture. Crap, that's a tenant thing. So we immediately called the guy. He actually donated this to the museum. Really nice guy, Paul Coelho. And we were taking the ROMs out for dumping the contents, of course, and we ended up finding a newer version of the Z80 ROM with some stuff corrected. So all of our confidence stating, "Yeah, we got the whole thing," and then it crumbles in the state that it was not the latest. And we also think that one is not even the latest. There's another one which is trapped on a ship that we have at the museum. So we want to do the release right and not state any lies in place of the former employees. So to honor their work, basically. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's the bizarre thing about the internet. You put something up and then somebody comes along and says, "Oh, hey, look at this thing I've had for 25 years.
Absolutely. This other guy, he was running. The drone had mentioned that there was one guy with one and the other one guy, not with three, with four. And he was running 30 years ago a supermarket, a mini market back in the 80s that were on his in-laws. And he actually he knew a guy that knew Luis Bandeira. And Luis Bandeira had heard about his experiments with Spectrum, and he gave him the 4 or 5 units that he had. And he actually developed a supermarket managing system that would do the point of sale over the tenant system, over the tenant network. We are trying to absolutely crazy stuff with networked printers, and the guy promised us to give us the discs for duplication. He's a very handy guy, so he wants to do the extraction himself. I'm kind of worried about it, but it's his discs. He was running a supermarket on Tenet in the 80s, which is crazy. I mean,
where was this, Hugo?
In Portugal, absolutely. Very
Portugal.
close to the factory, actually.
How bizarre.
Absolutely.
There's the music.
That is, wow.
Well, it just boils down to the community there, right? People know people and things like that. So, Timex is doing a lot of development there and says, hey, this is the perfect use case for this thing we're making. Hey, here, have a few of them, see what you can do with it, but it only happens in that kind of environment, right? Where Portugal's like Gal says, is a small, I mean, it's not small, but worldwide wise, it's pretty small, right?
It's the size of a county. I mean, come on.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's like, you're gonna have a lot of people that know a lot of people, in that kind of environment. So that's cool.
I don't know if Hugo knows this, but there are similar stories, not so advanced in terms of using something like the Tenet for that. But we have another friend, and he was yesterday with us in the GOTY, Paulo Zagal from SGO. Yeah. SGO was a big distributor in the north, so they acted more or less like Timex in the north in terms of distribution. And even their conventions were held together with the people from Timex. So they were the biggest distributor in this country of Timex stuff in the north of Portugal. And that guy got his job because he developed a software for a supermarket where he used to go, and they were trying to put something in the not in the balcony, in the window to announce something. And he saw something, he saw an opportunity, and he liked computers, and so he made the software to make some kind of announcements there, and he offered it to the guys. He offered it to the supermarket. It was a supermarket also. And eventually the guy from the computer company goes, sees that, and asks, who did this? And they call him. He was a kid. He worked as a security guard in a bank or something like that. And they hired him. And he got a job working with computers because of that. So funny stories that happen when you show initiative and you have some skills for technology, of course.
Wow. That's amazing. The stuff that comes out, just by virtue of the fact that we're able to, have these kinds of talks, is astounding.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, email is one thing and social media is one thing, but being able to sit and chat with each other just informally is really fantastic.
For your reference, Joao, in Argentina, I see two cell systems over the Timex computer using the FDD. One is for parking control. Yeah, and yes, exactly, because it's a limited quantity of cars. You have less 100. It's perfect for the disk storage in Timex. And also because you have a RTC, or the frame counting, very precise, because you're parking for 1 hour, 2 hours. That is the shift of the real-time clock is not a problem for the specific situation, and they are work very fine, very good.
Nice. Yeah. I didn't know that.
And Gustavo, you're not mentioning a little shop that had a 2068 running its inventory and sales system that you're familiar with.
Yes, no, I create a familiar for pharmacy, for medicine, the medicine store. They use the FDD3 system with 2 drives. In one drive they have customers, and in another drive they have the products. Okay, because two drives. Yeah, it's necessary to remove and push the correct disk. And at the end of the day, they close the sales and then get the list for the repository of the medicine to ask a laboratory to buy again for the next day. This is the real case of use, and they are using during 2 years. And the reason of use the Timex was the big characters, because the operator on the sale is really love this character. They don't love the PC or the IBM because the character are very slow. It's difficult to read. That is the reason that use Timex on this.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's
colors,
crazy.
of course. Yeah.
Guys, let me just interrupt to say that I'll need to go and have some dinner. My family is right by my
Me
side.
too. Katerina is
and-
complaining already.
Yeah.
Same
Yes.
thing.
Well, tell them thank
Likewise
you for
here.
sharing you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for showing out.
Thank
This is
you.
fantastic.
See you.
That's
Thank you
It's a
so much,
pleasure,
guys.
David. Whenever there's
It's
something,
always a pleasure.
Yeah, we stay in touch. We haven't we didn't get upset and stop the Timex connection because of anything, just because we didn't have time to go on. So what I mean is we keep open, both David, both myself, to do stuff together. So whenever the opportunity comes and it's the right time, we make it happen. So we may not be in all the calls, at least me, but we are paying attention and close, and everything relevant, give us a shout and we'll try to be.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank
you.
you, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well, in theory, we have 5 minutes left. So I guess we'll talk about, coordinating the VCF stuff.
Well, before is there anyone who's new here who hasn't spoken or who hasn't spoken about themselves or told about themselves?
Let's see.
I don't think so, but I always like to ask.
All the names are the usual suspects.
Okay.
I mean, some of these suspects are newer. But it's the those of us who are really into it, But yeah, so to your point, Adam, what I was going to say was, is there anything that anybody here wanted to talk about? I mean, we can certainly keep going. And I wasn't expecting, the Joao and Hugo to go so long.
Well,
I didn't feel like
mention...
it was long. I felt that it went very fast.
Oh yeah, I know. It's so much information.
Yeah.
Huge info dump.
And I did want to mention that, we're getting ready to put this thing into Adam's 2068 too, right? The stereo
the sound.
mod. Right. And this applies to, just more than the Timex 2068, right? I mean, it also would work on the Timex computer because that uses the same AY chip. And, the design for this really kind of came from the Spectrum, the 128 and the +2. And, when they started to put the sound chip in there, because I guess in Europe they have 2 different standards, right, for how the output goes. So that's why I have jumpers on this, because they have like what they call it ABC. So channel A goes to left, channel B goes to center, channel C goes to right. Or you can put the jumpers in what they call ACB, right, which is A still goes to left, channel C goes to the center, and channel B goes to the right. So different software was written for different methods for these jumpers. So, so the left and right and center, well, I guess the left doesn't matter, but the right and the center can be different where they coded the sound, the music.
Yeah, you're talking about the outputs of the AY chip.
Right, because, they would code the music to, say have the C channel be, the right.
Yeah.
And then other European software would have the C channel be the center. So it would kind of sound a little weird, but they made it so that you could change the jumpers. And I kind of put that on this design so it's available. But, I don't really think, I don't know how Timex software is written. We'll have to see, how the Timex sound. But I mean, I don't think they really made stereo Timex software, right? Because that just wasn't a possibility. So this would kind of be more for like people that, I mean, there is software out there that obviously does do stereo. For the
you can
Sinclair
run
stuff.
some Spectrum demos.
Right. Exactly. So, it
Well,
just really kind of depends on, how that works.
it also just, even if it's not designed for stereo, it just gives you kind of a spatial effect.
Right.
Mhm.
And the other thing too is I didn't want to kind of drill another hole. That's kind of another part of this is so it still has the composite. It goes where the composite video out will be. Right. That's where this is intended to go. So there's no new hole that needs to be drilled. You're taking the composite RCA jack out, and I kind of bought some extra ones so I could cut them up. But there's on the side here, there's a solder place, so I can cut it up, use the metal that's still there, solder this to it, and then you can solder this to the board, right? And you got to line it up so that the whole, because this is a big, this is a ring tip sleeve, right? So it's got three things on it.
Well, it's
And
1/8 inch still, though, right? It's not.
right,
It's
it's
not.
3.5 millimeter, but
Okay.
it's got a big thing here, and it does fit into the hole that it's already on there. So you just got to center it enough where it'll fit in there because you don't want it to hit, if it's too high or too low or to the left or to the right, you know. But
So
anyway, that's
wait, you
kind of
mean
where I
it's not
designed it.
snug? It's not. It doesn't fit very snugly. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it does, but it's just
Oh.
like if it's too low, then this round part here will hit the case and it won't fully seat in. See, so you have to get it right
Yeah.
so that this thing will actually clear the hole and go all the way and seat into
Ah.
this. See,
Carl,
because yeah,
you have to run jumper wires from the AY to that thing, correct?
right.
Okay, so to answer Paul's question,
Oh, he had a question?
Paul, if I recall correctly, the AY is socketed on
No.
the Z Expand, and
Oh, the
you
expand?
run jumper wires as well. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it would work with that. It would work with anything that uses an AY 8912 or 8910
Right.
or 13, any of those. All the ones that have the ABC outputs, even the Yamaha variants have
Right.
the 3 outputs, so it would work with that. Yeah.
So it's not something that we ever really talked about here for the US ones. I know they obviously they make this thing in the UK, right?
Yeah.
Because some people do modify their their 128s or their +2s and +3s to have stereo output. But
Mhm.
it's just kind of, Adam will have the first one.
Mhm.
And I don't
I've
know
got to
what he
find a use for it. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to run a
yeah,
supermarket. Anyone want
I
to
don't
open a market with me?
I
Well,
don't know what he would hook it up to. He doesn't have like a stereo receiver in his room there, so I don't know.
he's got stereo
Uh,
headphones.
well, that's
It'll
true.
theoretically drive the
Well, I
headphones.
mean, my television is stereo. I mean, what are you talking about?
Well, that's true. That's true
Yeah.
too. But the whole point was I didn't want to, I kind of thought, well, I'll just drill another hole, right? And then I'll have this audio jack. But I'm like thinking, well, what could I do to make it so I didn't have to mod the case? And so that's why I said, well, let me design the composite video as part of one of the signals that comes out of this jack. So we don't lose that, right? But we gain the stereo audio output in addition to the composite video out. So that's kind of where this design is different than anything else out there, right? Because it's just all the other designs out there are just for the audio. And you drill a hole and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
This one kind of combines it into one thing, so we don't have to we don't have to drill a hole into the case.
Hey, Johnny, can you send a link to that AY player that you mentioned? Can you send that to the groups.io list?
One of the problems, I think it's on a disk for the FDD.
Oh, so it's not okay. So we need to dig
you
it out
can
somewhere.
you can put it on a tape, but you also have to put the music on a tape.
Sure, we can make that. We could put. Yeah, we can do that.
One of the problems I was writing, but since I'm now talking, the Spectrum have a different frequency on the IE chip. I think the 2068 plays the music a bit slowly.
That's correct.
Than the Spectrum.
Yeah.
But it plays.
Is that due to the refresh rate of the 50
No,
hertz versus 60? No?
The IE chip have a frequency. You have to feed it a frequency. And it's different on the two machines.
Yeah.
So it plays a bit slowly.
Yeah, because
you only notice if you have the two machines playing side by side.
I see.
You'd hear it.
because
Right.
the Spectrum main clock is slower than the 2068s, but they may have divided the frequency higher. You know, so if the frequency going into the sound chip is higher slightly than the one that's in the 26 in the time, you know, the USA one. So
Are they both in tune, or was that to keep it in tune?
it's not. I don't think it's enough to really, you know, you like Johnny Red said, if you had them two together and you played them together, you probably tell the difference. But if you're just playing it from the one, you wouldn't notice.
Christian asked if it's possible to put recorded audio on a cartridge, and I mean the short answer is yes. You could, you can record audio, and you could, there's a method for manipulating the AY chip and using its volume control register to do audio output. It's pretty esoteric. I don't know if you could do something. You could do like bit bang the ear output port, maybe. I think that would be, except it would be really really low bandwidth. Actually, Adam, that speech synthesis
I was
software
going to
that
talk about
Adam,
that, but you brought it up first, so yeah.
yeah, that used the ear output. Yeah. So
Oh, and one other thing too, before I forget on this AY thing, it also cuts the speaker out, right? Because we talked about that. There's no way to turn the internal speaker on the 2068 off. Well, if you plug something into this, it shuts the internal speaker off.
oh,
So that's kind of another feature, right? So that say like you didn't even want to use the audio out, you just wanted to shut the speaker off. Well, you could just plug your cable into it, right, and not hook anything to the audio outs, but so it would shut the internal speaker off entirely.
So you're using a switched
right,
jack.
it's a switch jack, right.
Okay. Interesting.
And it also combines the stereo signals back into a mono signal to send it to the op amp, right. So I'm kind of making it stereo, and then when you unplug the jack, it combines it all into mono again and sends it back to the op amp.
Sums it back, yeah. The 3/8 inch output on the Pico, like on the Pico video, Paul. There's a 1/8 inch out audio jack. Yes. Okay, our next meeting is, I can't tell you how many weeks it is from now, but it is Monday the 3rd.
It seems like this one came up quick for some reason.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was like,
2 weeks. Yeah.
It was 2 weeks. Yeah, I don't know how far Monday the 3rd is. It's in the future.
I look forward to it.
Well, I mean, pulling up the calendar here real quick, that's basically 2 weeks from tomorrow.
2 weeks.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Thank you.
And wait before we go
ahead.
It's no agenda for it, right? It's just
Not
open
yet.
forum again.
That's correct. Unless you guys come up with something that you want to talk about, in which case send a message to the list and we'll pick up on that. And
Well, hopefully Adam will have some experience with this new AY sound thing. So, because I'm kind of curious to see how it works.
Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. Because like I said, there's a lot more going. Because the power supply's got to go in. The switching regulator's got to get to say. There's a lot more than that just going on with this audio jack thing. It's kind of all in conjunction together with it.
Carl is like, I made this for you. Use it now.
That's right.
Exactly.
Now.
You have 4 minutes.
That's right. I only got 5 boards, but hey, if it turns out to work pretty good, and other people might want to do it, because again, this is an internal modification thing. So, I think it's going to be limited. Not a lot of people are going to want to unsolder their 28-pin AY chip in there and stuff like that. So you'll have probably one of the few that
Thank you.
probably ever get made. So I'm kind of curious, because I know you like to do sound things.
Yeah.
So I'd be kind of curious to see how you find some software, probably even in the Spectrum realm, that uses the AY chip, but then I think the ports are different. So that probably
Well,
wouldn't
you and I
work.
can collaborate that on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, think of things that you could try with it because I know you like to do that. So it'd be kind of
There's a
interesting.
program called Musicola, which I believe uses the UI
Called
chip.
what?
Musicola, MUS.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
I've even used it.
You can download it off the
Yeah.
website. I'm pretty sure that uses the UI chip, and I think that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. It was
Yeah, I remember that software from back in the day. Musicola, right?
Yeah.
There's a COLA at the end. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, gentlemen, it's been
Bye,
as fun as
everybody.
usual. See you
Thank you,
in
gentlemen.
Have
2
fun
weeks,
with your
right, Carl?
snow, David.
Oh yeah. I gotta go snowblow in a minute.
No, for real?
For real.
Yeah, they're getting hammered up there, man. Storm after storm after storm.
Yeah, Cleveland's getting hit too.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen.
Bye.
All right.